Channel. So good to be here on Sunday and Sunday at Mike's. How's everybody doing out there? I hope you're doing fine. We are having a little bit of a heat wave here in this part of the world. Well, a couple of parts of the world, up to my understanding, but here it's a little bit brutal. The European, I thought the sun on the equator was brutal, but the sun here, man, it is brutal. But anyway, I'm still here. I hope you are too. Thank you guys so much for showing up to the live stream. I always start out while I wait for more people to show up in the live stream by first thanking moderator here, Scott, always here with me in the beginning. I appreciated Scott, and gardening is not a bad thing. I spent the last 7 hours being a lumberjack. Oh, I used to have to do that in Japan because I had a wood burning stove, so I had to cut wood and didn't do it for 7 hours. But after a couple of hours, boy, you feel it. My gardening is restricted to my deck here. It's a pretty big deck, but pretty big garden. That sun ate everything up. I'm trying to find a place to put my lettuce away so it doesn't get wilted by the sun. It's brutal out there. Hey, how you doing, Ben? Good to have you here, sir. Michael Watson has showed up as well. Welcome, welcome. Well, again, like I said, while we wait for more people to show up here in the live stream, I will of course start out by saying thank you so much for taking your time to spend some time with me. Time is a valuable thing, and spending it with me is really greatly appreciated. I always want to start out by saying that to everybody, that you guys know. And what else? Yeah, this week I was doing some production work actually. I was actually doing what I, used to really do all the time. And it's funny, it reminds me of, getting on a bike that you haven't ridden in a while. At first it's a little squeaky, but once it gets going, it gets going. So there's that. We're going to talk a little bit more about that tonight. Actually, we're going to talk all about that tonight because a couple of things came to me after that rant I did on DAWs. And by the way, I still am not really pleased with the DAWs performance. But it has its plus points. For editing, it's pretty nice. Again, like I said, for laying down tracks, it's pretty nice. But Studio One, I'm talking about. But overall, when it comes to latency issues and just eating up CPU, and I know all the tricks in order to try to cut that down in Studio One, but I'm still getting latency issues, so I've still got to go through here and figure out, what that is when I was mixing today. But I'll play a little bit of that for you guys later. So stick around for that. But while I was recording, I thought about last week's discussion about DAWs. I was kind of ranting a bit, and desirably, reasonably so, because my desire was to just record, not to sign up for this subscription or put in this, registration key or all the things that I had to do before I got to the actual recording. But once I got recording, I started thinking about the things that I can do in order to not use plugins and to really minimize my plugins. Everything that goes in, everything that I track that goes in, I'm locking that sound in. I'm not going to go in and do any post reverbs or stuff like that, other than with the vocal. But for the instruments, I tracked all of those live or straight into Studio one at a time. And I want to talk about that because, instead of griping about what's broken in the modern recording world, I want to shine a light on things that I think that are working still And not only they're working, but they're cheap. They're not expensive things. So we're not going to be talking about $3,000 Neve preamps tonight. Which, to be honest with you, you can really get decent recordings without it. If you don't believe me, just look at most of the recordings again that were done by you know cats like Sly Stone in his home studio, Prince in his first home studio. If you sort of take that approach and don't worry, get the best equipment you can, don't spend a lot of money on it to get the best sound down as possible, then I think you'll be more prone to concentrate on the music than you are to be concentrating on the equipment. But there are some pieces of gear that I want to talk about tonight that really, really, really do shine for me. And they work for me. They make my tracks come alive. And it makes it so that I don't have to use plugins. It's something that I want to do. My last album was, I used quite a few plugins, especially on the opening track, the first track, Funky Good Time, because I had some weird effect things that I wanted to do, and I had some time displacement things that I wanted to do. So that was the peak of my plug-in use. So you can listen to that track and hear that how that came out. But generally, I like to try to track the way that I used to track when I was a teenager, and so we're going to talk about that. Let me catch up here in the chat. Make sure I said hello to everybody. Tiger Blood, how you doing, sir? Greetings. Run Riot, hey, how you doing? Mike, good to see you, Mike. It was a good rant about description shakedowns, in my opinion. Yeah, man. It's really something. They in the middle of this session, I was telling you about Melodyne, which I use to do some minor corrections if needed. But they were asking me, it's not the full version I used to have. I said that. But then in the middle of the session, they were like, hey, why don't you download the new version? I was like, hell no. Because that's a trap. A little Admiral Akbar jumped on my shoulder and said, it's a trap. I was like, yeah, I know. I don't need you to tell me that, fish face. But honestly, I said no. So yeah, Mike, I agree. Scott. Steinberg has a USB thumb drive with the licensed stuff on it, and it won't work without it in North America. Some legal thing where it has to be separate. Yeah, it's that iLock thing, similar to that, which I paid for some Isotope EQs, and I can't access it. They won't allow me to access it unless I set up an iLock account. And from my understanding is I actually have to have the iLock devices too. I'm like, screw you. No. What's the difference between plugins and IRs? I'm clueless. Well, plugin is a digital replication of a audio device, of an amp, of of microphone, of many things. Old. Even all up to the use of old console sounds, like a Neve from the UK or an SSL from New York. IRs are digital captures of sounds that are used in order to replicate things like for example, this little, what is this thing called? The Mooer. So it uses those captures in order to replicate cabinets, speakers, things of that nature. Not too different, however, a plugin is going to be more a hardware based thing. Actually, in a way, is the way I look at it. Maybe right, maybe wrong. I hope that explains that. So. Which is known for a higher quality sound. Well, it's just like everything else. It depends upon who created it and what they used to create it. Some of these plugins are created, especially with those who shall not be named, uh, are created, in my opinion, rather cheaply and sold very expensively. Whereas you'll go to a very good company that invests a lot of money and doesn't have a great range of plugins, but they're known for one or two. And those are the ones that are really, especially hardware versions of old compressors, old limiters, old EQs. Those are the ones that, there's a quality to them. And yeah, you can hear it. It's just like with IRs, you can hear the difference in quality of IRs. Like you'll get IRs included in something like the Muir, but some of the IRs that I've loaded in that are from third parties blow the Muir ones that are stock away, to be honest, sound wise. So yeah, it's a moving target. Interesting stuff. Thanks, Mike. Sorry to throw you off. No, you didn't throw me off. That's what we were here to talk about. You kept on target. You kept on on target. So that's good. We're keeping on point tonight, guys. Let's keep it there. That's good. Um, first amp. First up is this. I've talked about this before. I want to talk about it again tonight. I've had this thing now for it's it's got to be coming up on 2 decades, maybe 15 years, somewhere in there. I've had this, and this is the Art Tube MP. They came out with two versions of this: the version 1 and the version 2. As usual, everybody will tell you the version 1 is better. I have had both. At one point in my studio in Singapore, I had both 1 and 2, and I was running stereo through them. But that one I gave to a friend, and I always kept this one because this is the one I've always had. It's got a vintage tube in it. It's got an old, interesting enough, tube that was made here in the Netherlands back in the 60s. And what it does is it warms up, just simply put, it warms up your digital tracks. One of the things that I found that when you're running, for example, I've got my pedal board up here, which is essentially, my guitar amp, my guitar studio, my sound. And one thing that I noticed that when I run it through a cabinet, it sounds great. When I run it into the DAW, it sounds a little digitally. It doesn't sound warm, I guess is the best term. If I run the pedal board into this and then this into the DAW, or not, well, of course, through my interface. But if I do this, if I put this in the chain, it warms those tracks up. It makes them sound analog. And I've had a lot of devices that claim to, act as a tube. I remember that, what was that called? Monster Pedal or Tube Monster? Tube Monster, I think it was called. Supposed to be a thing was about that big. It was huge. And I was taking that apart, looking at that, and determining if that really was a tube preamp, a tube amp sound in a pedal. There are other for cheap because those, well, actually not that cheap. Those things have actually gotten to be expensive, believe it or not. I didn't like it, as you guys know. I didn't keep it because it didn't raise to the level of this. This actually, truly, honestly, 100% works. Also, I use this on my vocals. It warms up my vocals. It takes this mic that I've had, again, another mic I've had for maybe 3 decades now, and it really warms it up, and and you can hear it. And there's many a plugin that will do that, warm up your track, so to speak. However, if I do, and I have, if I do A and B between the tracks that I use this one on and the ones I use the plug-in on, this one always stands out. Especially if I dial it in correctly. If I get the right, levels coming out of this thing. And it's pretty much well, you set it, and it's good to go. I don't mess with this too much. I make the adjustments over through the interface, but it works. And so, you've probably seen this thing. You probably own one and forgot about it. But I think it's one of the most useful and underrated pieces of home studio gear ever made. Now, this was introduced back in the 1990s as a simple budget preamp. And it's got one job, like I said, it's to warm up your signal. And it does it. It actually, truly, actually does it. And if you change the tube in it, it changes the dynamics of the sound, So that's how I know it does work. I've got a tube in here. After swapping out a couple and trying a few, I found one that I like the sound of. I use it for vocals. I use it for bass. I used to use it for reamping synth sounds, tracking straight into the interface through it. It doesn't rely on software. It doesn't rely on firmware. It works the same in 2025 as it did back in 1998. Okay. You can pick them up secondhand between 40 to 60 bucks, and they still outperform many plugins for warmth and color. So this, you say, of course, and there's rack versions of this as well, and not a Focusrite. Well, Focusrite is going to be your interface. This is the interface you're going to use between whatever you're tracking and your interface. So, guitar pedal board into this, microphone into this, and then this into your interface. So it offers a unique sonic flavor when stacked. Very useful on lo-fi, ambient, or gritty blues and rock. This what is that song? Taken, that song I wrote, Taken, the one that got picked up for that TV commercial that hit big over in Korea. I used the guitars going through this, my amp, miking my amp, then the mic's going into here, and then going, and it has a gritty sound. I was like, whoa, it's just this full, rich, warm sound. So there's that. If you're sick of the sterile, and that's another thing, is music, I remember I listened to a digital version of, they had digitalized the Eagles' Peaceful Easy Feeling. Listen to the original track, and then listen to the digital version. In the original track, the slide guitar solo slightly distorts, but in analog, it has a kind of a sweetness to it. Where they were just it peaked. It probably just peaked the board. Glenn Johns wasn't, he was too busy doing a line in the bathroom. He wasn't watching the meters. I don't know that, but it does peak in that song. You'll hear it. And in the digital version of it, it distorts badly. So it surprises me that they let that go out. So it actually, digital actually makes things sterile and brittle. Things that used to be recorded analog, where in analog, it gave it, the transients gave it, a different flavor to it. In digital, that can be the kiss of death. That can be the kiss of death. Let me catch up here in the chat. It seems to me, Scott says, that gear like modern modeling amps are only as good as long as it's supported by the manufacturer updates and such. Yeah, again, that's part of the trap. So you invest all that money into getting a particular thing, and then it calls for an update, and sometimes those updates are not great. And, there is, they updated this. They came out with version 2. But that was it. You know, there's no 15 versions of this. Is the point of that. And again, that's why my hardware, and I'm investing in hardware, going forward. If, there's so many people gone digital that a lot of the old stuff like this is even cheaper because nobody wants it. So believe me, I'm hunting for it. So because again, if you use a hybrid system, I think that's the best of both worlds, and you're still got limitations. And eventually, like I said, I'm going to stop using DAW altogether and just go to a hardware-based recorder. So there's that. So no interface still. So interface still needed. Yes, yes, absolutely. However, um, this does have balanced and unbalanced inputs and outputs. And I think that's one of the things that makes this a pro piece. Because, quite frankly, I don't even think anybody would design something like this at this price point these days. I just got in. What's it called? The remaster disaster, Mike? Yeah, it was. Listen to that. Listen to, I'm not kidding. Listen to a pair of headphones and listen to the slide guitar solo on Peaceful Easy Feeling, and tell me if it doesn't get really, nails to the boardy there at some point. Whereas if you listen to the album, it's not there. Yeah, I would do that to peaks. Yeah, Bob, that's correct. It couldn't handle. Now they could have, set the peak at minus dB in order to avoid that, but I don't know, somehow or another. The lead vocal on Prince's Little Red Corvette just squirts in the chorus, and it bugs me every time I hear it. Yeah, that's because Prince was tracking those vocals and tracking to his 16-track, which actually was set up like a 24. It was a 16-track recorder that you could put 24-track tapes on. So he would do the initial 16 at home and then go to whatever studio and add the additional overdubs. And the board that he was using was not a recording board. It was actually a broadcasting board. And he was redlining that all the time. And Jimmy Jam and Terry Lewis, they didn't have any experience with recording really at the early stages. So when they got their board, they were redlining theirs as well, because they were like, well, shit, Prince redlines his, but his could handle that kind of overhead. The one that they had couldn't. So listen to Janet Jackson's Control album, and you'll hear, that those songs have a distinct distortion going throughout the entire album, because they were peaking, they were peaking on that. And just like, Prince, it adds to a little sizzle to it. Doesn't bother me, but yeah, same thing. It's a true story. The lead on, with tape, we were always plagued by wow and flutter. Yeah. Now there's plug-in to add it in. I know. I have a tape console, a master 2-track master plug-in from Jimi Hendrix producer. What's his name? Somebody remind me. I can't think of his name right now. That he put out. And you can add wow and flutter to it. True story. Noise reduction, 80s technology, and Dolby. Yeah. And again, it worked, So you don't need a Neve clone to make a track feel analog. Sometimes a simple little $50, tube box like this will do the trick. Now the next thing there's a question here. I like questions. Michael Watson, what is the device you are showing us called, Mike? Well, this is the ARC Tube MP. So this is a professional processor series from Art from the 90s. Came out in the 90s. And it was, it was a boom in the 90s of gear like this. Uh, eh, for the home and for the studio. I use this in recording studios, in the small rooms, the tracking rooms. At Babyface's studio, I had this with me, so I've had this a long time. Is that yeah yeah? Because I had this before I went to Japan. Yes. Is that true? No. Was it Babyface's studio, or was it a studio in Japan? Anyway, some studio I took this in, and this the engineer was cool with it. So yeah. Um, Boy, those trips down memory lane are getting more and more dangerous as I get older. Not fun. So when I was doing this track that I'm going to play for you guys here in a little bit, I I told you that I had been listening to Sly Stone a lot. And I was remembering that he used the Soundmaster rhythm box a lot. He called it his funk box. I know that as you guys know, Prince, again, speaking of Prince, used his drum machine, the Linn drum. And for my generation, going into the 90s, was the MPC60. Now, the MPC60 was an all-in-one machine. You could cut, if you had an MPC60 and a couple of keyboards, um, you know, and yeah, if you had an MPC60 and a couple of keyboards, you could track all your instruments, even including some vocal drops that you could do, samples that you could drop in. It was, and will always be the quintessential um, piece of gear, must have gear. It, I wish I had it. Because for a track like this one today, if I had an MPC 60, just even one keyboard, because I'm tracking one track, a decent one, and uh, uh, you know, my 24 track digital recorder, I wouldn't need also yet another alternative to using a DAW, because you can log all that stuff up together and you can go to town. Art Tube preamp. Art Tube preamp. Mr. Larson, good evening. And so, really, for Jock and I, it was a must-have thing. I remember there was a guy that made his money through illicit sources, but he wanted to funnel some of those ill-gotten gains into a recording studio, and he asked me to set up a recording studio, and I said as payment for that, I want an MPC 60. He gave me cash, $2,000 cash, because that's how much it cost. Crisp bills. Probably should have washed my hands afterwards, but anyway. And I bought my MPC 60, and once I had that, that was it, because I could work from home. Reggie had an MPC 60 that Jock and I used at his studio at the South Central Unit recording studios. But to have one of my own at home, that was like, I had that girl, Anastasia, the singer, when she was trolling around LA. That's a story for another time. But I had her over at my apartment, and I was playing a track for her that I was thinking about cutting her with her. And she was looking for music and a place to stay. But again, that's a story for another time. And uh, that was it for me, having an MPC60. And all the time that I've been working using DAW, tracking drums live. Well, then I could play drums too, and then I was able to track drums live. And now I've gone full circle back to where I'm using samples again, because I can't track drums here. And the first thing I thought when I was programming the drums, although they have great things out there like real drums and all that stuff, they got pretty realistic sounding stuff out there, but it doesn't sound the same as a drum machine kind of thing. And so I had to dig through my sound samples to come up with drum machine sounds and program it and to try to get that sound, but I found myself missing the MPC60. So that's another alternative that I want to throw out there. It's old. It was designed by Roger Lynn in 1988. Only 12-bit sampling. But it's legendary for its swing feel. It can really make your track swing. It has a swing function in it that you could adjust the swing, and it really gave your tracks a feel. Pete Rock, Jay Dillard, DJ Shadow, Dr. Dre, Teddy Riley, all of these guys built careers and produced many albums using that drum machine. The only other one that was as popular was the SB80. That would be the other drum machine. But it was really, seriously the MPC60. I, like an idiot, bought an Apple computer with software, and I could have used that money to buy an MPC60 earlier. Because I thought then, funny thing, I know you guys are going to laugh when you hear this coming from me, especially after my DAW ramp. But I had some money. I bought an Apple, one of the early Apple computers, had software that you could do recording. Very basic stuff. And I thought that was going to be the future, but no, it was at that time, they were like, you need to get rid of that computer shit and get yourself an MPC60. I'm full disclosure, guys. I thought then that this was going to be the future, and now that I've gotten it, I'm not happy. That's a true story. There's something we've lost today. Modern DAWs really encourage second guessing. And hardware like the MPC60 really trains you to trust your taste and to go with what you got. Now, there are, in 2025, a working MPC60 is still worth about $1,500. So they have not lost their value because they're still relevant. They're still relevant. So if I still had that MPC60 to this day, it would still be worth what I paid for it. And you can't say that about a lot of equipment. So I bring that up. I found myself missing the MPC60 the last 2 days when I was tracking. And, you can replace that. There's a newer MPC60s. There's the SB44s. There's a lot of things out there. They came up with the MPC62 and then all the other ones. I think there's like 5 versions of that now. But frankly speaking, it's the first one. You want to get the first one. Just like you want to get the first Akai, sampling units. Because there's just some 8-bit sampling or 12-bit sampling, but still. I use the Sonic Mirage, by the way. I just thought of that. Boy, there's a thought I haven't had in a while in Reggie's studio as well. Yeah, Sonic Mirage was another sampling keyboard. As a matter of fact, a very famous one. A lot of people use that. But again, because it was hardware based, I wasn't deciding, oh, I don't like that drum. So let's replace that drum set. Well, I didn't get into that thing. I said, this is what it sounds like. Let's go. And I think that the workflow was better. Again, like I said, I didn't have to put in a plug-in key, a iLok key into the MPC60 before I could use it. I could just use it. So there's that. Don't know how many of you guys out there ever used the MPC60. If you were into R&B production in the 90s, that was the machine. So there's that. Now, the other thing today that I was thinking about when I was writing this script was about keyboards. So let me talk about that a little bit. Let me catch up here in the chat too. Mike, I'm old enough to remember the drum machine controversy, re-jobs lost for real drummers. Yeah, but what happened was that wasn't true. If your genre of music called for a drummer, then you got a drummer. If it called for a drum machine, then you use a drum machine. In the case of Janet Jackson, where they were using drum machines, they brought in a drummer to just trigger the samples on his drum kit. And things were, so the drummer really wasn't out of a job. And again, that was a statement that I didn't like it back then. I said, no, this thing's not taking a drummer's job. If I need a drummer, I'm still going to use it. And people still overdub. I did that a lot. I overdubbed, drum machines with live drums all the time. So there was that, though. I remember that too, Mike. I see a lot more professional types using the UA Apollo interface unit. Yep. Jock uses that unit. He has that. Why are they so much more expensive than other interfaces? Do they do something different recording wise or something? Well, again, that gets into the internal workings. I myself here use the Behringer Euphoria. It's a Behringer. So costs you about $140, I think. Whereas the Focusrite will be about $200, and the UA Apollo will be somewhere around $499. I do believe the Apollo also has some built-in effects, or there's something extra in it that you don't get in a standard interface like this one, like the Behringer. So I think that's why, in the case of that. Sorry for the simple questions, but I'm pretty much illiterate of technology. No, Ben, that's great, because there's first it gives me a chance to fill up the spaces. Where there aren't long pauses of silence while I think of what the next thing to say, like on a first date. And the second thing is it keeps us on target and thinking about what we should be thinking about, the signal chain. Signal chain is really what I'm talking about tonight. Boy, like I said, this thing, I ended up using 23 tracks, 23 tracks for this song. It was a big one, because I've got 8 tracks just for horns, and then I've got, okay, no, that's not true, 20 tracks I used on this. So this is a big one for me. Lead vocals, background vocals, all that stuff. Doubling some stuff. But honestly speaking, I found myself wishing that for the keyboard parts that I had some of those older keyboards that I used to have. The DX7 was nice. I mentioned the Core Poly 800 was a great one. What else? Certainly the M1, which is the one that I really liked. there were a lot of those keyboards that had great sounds in them. And I'm going to finish on keyboards because I think that there are new keyboards that blow the old ones away. It's one of the few things out there. I played a keyboard in a shop. Gosh, was it a Roland? Maybe it was a Roland keyboard. Expensive thing, about $4,000 today, $4,000. I'm talking about recently. Uh, well, about last year. Was it this? Yeah, late last year, when before Bax closed. I was in Bax picking up a case, and I sat down on the keyboard and started playing it. And they had an OBX-A patches in it, and I started playing 1999, and it was that sound. they had DX7 sounds in it. They had a lot of I guess they licensed these sounds, or they just straight stole it. I don't know, but all the old keyboards were in this modern keyboard, plus some great strings, really nice string samples like you would find from East West. Really nice, like authentic sounding strings, nice sounding strings. Plus regular Fender Rhodes, stuff like that. So the next thing that I'm going to get, that I realized, if you're going to walk away, I said, Michael, from using the DAW, all of your keyboards are DAW based. That's it. This keyboard is just a MIDI keyboard. It doesn't have any sounds built into it. So I'm using my keyboards from plugins. So if I do go to a hardware solution and walk away, then another thing that I'm going to need is a keyboard that has a great palette of sounds on it that I can use. I cannot have a discussion about recording without discussing Prince, because it's so relevant. I could talk about other producers. As you know, he's not the only producer and writer I know about, but he's the one that everybody knows about in general. He was that famous, and he did a lot of things that were super smart. And really, one of the things that he did was his recording process, the way that he went through that. I had a train of thought there, guys, and I got distracted here by something here. Sorry. Anyway, the point of mentioning Prince is to bring up the fact that smart ways of tracking, this stuff. I'm going to look back in the replay of this, and I remember where I was going with that, because I really can't. I hate when I get distracted. I distract myself. Cat's Music Journey. Hi, Mike. I hope you're doing. Been having a wonderful Sunday. I have. Thank you. I was thinking about getting the 88 mini in-phase keyboard, but it's 2 inches longer than my console. That's what I was talking about, keyboards. So thank you, Scott. So Prince used the same keyboards all the time. He used the OBX-A, so much so that he programmed himself. He put his own programs in there. And Rick James, famously, after their tour together, so Prince was opening act for Rick James stole his keyboards and used those keyboards on some albums later on. I think his Glow album was stolen Prince keyboards. That's not a lie. It's a true story. He stole Prince's keyboard because he liked the sound. Rick James was something. But they stuck to a keyboard sound, and I'm not afraid of that. And today, the new modern keyboards have so many sounds, such a huge palette in them, that's an okay proposition for me. So, yeah, if I do go that route, I realize that I'm going to have to get a keyboard. Now, my brother has a DX7, but, that I could probably borrow from him, but frankly speaking, that's not, it's interesting, but it isn't all. If I had two keyboards, one of them I guess would be a DX7 because there's a lot of good stuff in that. Jimmy Page was good at sound engineering as well as film score. Yeah, well, he cut his teeth. I still can't believe that the 1960 66 is it 67 recording of Goldfinger. I think I mentioned this before. You got Jimmy Page on guitar on that recording, and John Paul Jones. This is pre Led Zeppelin playing the bass parts on Goldfinger, the James Bond theme song, Goldfinger. So yeah, he was cutting it. He knew. He spent a little time in the studio doing some serious work. He might have been a suspect character, but Rick James definitely had a lot of good songs. Yeah, yeah, talent, attaches itself regardless of the character attaches itself to. I found that to be very true. So there is that. So a keyboard, is something that I'm going to have to get, because why is that important in 2025? Because the sound cuts, and honestly, you want to get that warmth that a keyboard that even the plugins can't give you. So there's that. So what's the point of all of this? Why talk about gear from the 80s and 90s when we got every plugin imaginable now? Because this stuff works. These three items that I pulled out of a hat tonight to discuss, a tube preamp, a drum machine, and synthesizers, prove that you don't need the latest update to make real music. If you have those things and a way of getting it to some kind of recording, even if 2-track live with a group, whatever, still you don't have to worry about it crashing. You don't have to worry about latency issues. You don't have to worry about any of those things. They don't crash. They don't lock you out. They don't get bloated with features that you'll never use. There's features on Studio One, frankly, I have no idea what they are. And I've been recording professionally since I was 16. And, yeah. Anyway, I like this stuff because, it does its job. If you treat it nice, had no problems with this. I've never had to put it in for repair, and I've had it for a while now. At least 2 decades. I'm starting to think maybe more, but at least when it came out. So there's that. Now, I've been talking about production. What I'd like to do is play something for you guys. Now, do you guys want to hear it? First of all, I should ask, are you guys interested in hearing the song that I recorded this weekend? I haven't recorded in a while, but let me know if you guys want to hear this one. I'll play it for you, and we can talk about it a little bit. Let me get my notes up here for the Canyon story real quick and catch up here in the chat. Of course. Hell yeah, Mike. We are your test market. Yeah. Well, okay, so I had, starting in A, and I don't know if I can play this where you guys can see it. It was, and then up to D. So basically A to D. Basically, honestly, these are the same chords, by the way, that you would find in Sweet Thing and a lot of other songs, this progression. So I had that progression. And so that was, and I generally write from guitar these days. I don't write, even if it's a keyboard, there's a lot of keyboards in the song, I generally will write from the guitar. because it's all, you know, transferable anyway. And it's a lot easier to, again, like I said, I've got to plug in the computer, then I got to set up the keyboard, and I got to do all that. And who wants to do that when I can just grab a guitar and start working? Again, workflow. But I had that progression. Hey, Warheart Arts, how are you doing? Cat's Music Journey, hey, how you doing? Welcome, welcome. So I had that progression, and I had an idea for a lyric. Actually, it was one of those situations. The song is about a real live girl. First of all, this is not, you know, this is about a real live girl. And a thought that I had, and a lyric that came when I was actually talking to her. And sometimes, again, inspiration comes from real life with me. There's no song. Well, a little bit of a girl, a little bit. Well, there's a few things in there, but it essentially started with talking to this really, 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 really gorgeous Spanish girl, and getting to know her, and I came up with this song. Inspiration really comes from real life. I was listening to Parliament earlier, so now everything sounds like funk low. Yeah, I wanted, as you guys know, I've been producing a lot of rock music lately, a lot of guitar-oriented music, and I wanted to first write a light, airy summer song, because that was the mood, that chord progression. You know, it's a light, airy, for, you know, A to D. It's a very, you know, there's a lot of stuff in there. And I wanted to write a summer song. I wanted to make it a romantic song, a little old schoolish. And the other thing was, I wanted it to groove, because, like I said, I've been listening to Sly a little bit, and that kind of inspired this track as well. So production-wise, just giving you guys a little preamble here, just to discuss the production-wise where I was coming from. The other notes that I'll make about this, and then I'll play it for you, is if you listen to almost all of my recording, no, if you listen to all my recordings, there's two things that you'll never hear me use. First thing is the organ. The second thing are horns. There was a song, "The Field Before the Woods," the title track to that album. When I played it for my brother said, "Oh, this is really nice, but, you know, maybe you should have put some organ in it." And I said, I can't stand the organ, because it was a sound that, you know, it used to bother me. And then again, I started listening to Sly, and I said, okay, you know, let me see if I can work that. Second thing is horns. I always considered horns to be the kiss of death. You know, when Prince stopped using synthesizer horns and started bringing in a real horn section, that's when I stopped listening to Prince. Believe it or not, because and those are great horn players. He had legendary horn players up there playing with him, but it wasn't working for me. But again, in listening to Sly and listening to Cynthia's trumpet playing and going through that for the last week or so, it got me into the mood where I decided I would try to incorporate horns and organ into a track. So anyway, this song is called "There's Something That I Want to Tell You." I'll play it for you guys. I'm having latency issues, so there may be a little crackling in it, but let's see if you like it. It is R&B. This is the first R&B track, R&B pop. It's first, well, soul pop. It's the first thing I've done like this in a long time, because usually I'm doing rock. But I had to prove myself I could do a soul song. So anyway, let's listen to it.
There's something that I wanna tell you. There's something that I wanna say. Girl, it's just that I come to realize how you make my day. May I, may I, may I, may I.
it's hot in here. I'm gonna turn on the fan, guys. It is getting hot in here. All right, so what did you guys think? Did you like that? Let's catch up here. Very nice. Yacht Rock. Very nice for a good soul tune for a Sunday afternoon. Chill out, I can dig. Yeah, it's a chill song. I can see how a track like that can easily be overproduced with a big band and horns. Yeah. Simple is usually better. Not everyone can mix pet sounds. This is so good. Thank you, guys. Thank you, guys. Yeah. So, all that is hand played. I didn't use any sequence other than the drum machine. I sequenced the drum track and just let that ride. But everything else is hand played to the track. So this is the drum loop that I used, programmed it in. Really simple thing. And what I wanted to do is build upon that. You know, I wanted to take that chord progression and build on just underneath just a groove. And so it started from there. And I like the guitar solo. The guitar solo is done on this guitar, on my 74 Greco. I really like the sound that I got out of that. I like the counter melodies that go in the guitar solo there, playing against the horns. I said if I'm going to do horns, I really want it to play against, you know, the horn parts. Yeah, and yeah, yeah. So there's that. Yeah, reminds me of a band called Philosopher Kings. Very good. Thank you. Yeah. So I want to write a happy, bouncy, mellow song, and there's counterpoints in there. There's a lot of stuff going on there in this track. How many tracks in total? Yeah, 20. I was right. It was 24 tracks. It was 24 tracks. I ran 24 tracks on this. The bass line for this song actually is me playing the guitar, my parts caster, because I didn't have a bass guitar. So I said, okay, I'll play the bass line on the guitar and I'll just double it. And I think that it came out great. You would never know that that was not a bass guitar playing that. You know, that's a trick that I'm going to have to use in the future. But I just, you know, it was a song again that I wanted to do because I wanted to write something R&B-ish, and a lot of production in this. But again, everything hand played. I didn't sequence anything. And that's why I think when you play things by hand, it gives it that looser quality. It doesn't seem like that tight to the grid kind of rigidness. Although my timing is pretty good. I might the vocal. I'm trying to decide. The mix is I haven't mixed it yet. This is just a rough mix, but anyway, I like it. I hope you guys did. I really enjoyed bringing that to you. At least I'm always, you know, it's time to practice what one preaches. So I'm always talking about production and use this. And by the way, though, you can hear it's through this cheap phone. When you hear it through, when I release it, and you guys hear it through a good set of headphones, you'll hear the warmth of it. It's a very warm song too, because again, tracked a lot of it through this tube preamp to give it that, yeah. Do you have guitar effects? Yeah, I've got a whole rack up here. The cabinet was one of the cabinets I selected off the Moore. I ran it through the Noble's preamp And that's it, just to get that, just and then in the number one slot on here, the neck pickup, just to get that pick, that jazzy kind of almost like I was playing a 335. I wanted to try to get, which again shows that you can get any kind of guitar sound out of any guitar. Hey Maddie, how you doing? Welcome. I dislike track I dislike track sequencing drum parts that aren't looped. Yeah, I just wanted a groove. I actually programmed that. And I had planned on, doing something a little bit more elaborate, but then I listened to it and I said, you know what, it's fine, just the way it is. Again, just keeping a groove underneath and then building the track on top of that. The groove is in time. And so therefore, everything that you play on top of that theoretically should be in time as well. There's no need to lock it to a grid if you're a decent player. Finishing recording tasks in mix next month, I suppose. Yeah, I have to do it quickly. So I started this song. Finally, was that the day after our live, the day after. So it was last like Wednesday. So Friday, I started working on this, and I finished. Basically, it's at the point where I can mix it. Some parts of the vocal I may go in and fix up. But other than that, I have to get them done, mix it, master it, and then move on. I can't go back and mix whole albums. I used to do that, and that's just tiresome work. So I've adapted, again, the principle Prince had, fresh tape. He would do a song all the way through it, even if it meant staying up all night, finish it, and move on to the next one. Frederick, how you doing? Welcome. Yeah. So there's that, guys. That's what I was working on. I like that. I like that song. It's very different from some of the stuff that you guys have heard from me. I wanted to do a breezy, light summer song, romantic song. Talking about, pretty much, one of the prettiest girls that you guys would ever see. Certainly one that I've ever seen. And she's so sweet. Anyway, at least she inspired a song, which is good. Let's talk about the Doors. So let's get back. I worked, yeah, I know, Warhol, you were telling me, and I envy that. It's a great catchy tune, Mike. Thank you, Ben. Thank you. Again, like I said, I just had, I was sitting there on my couch and I had, there's something that I want to tell you. There's something that I want to say. And just kind of go from there. Let's talk about the Doors. Let's get back to Laurel Canyon. I think we've covered a lot of characters. Let's go into, we opened up this whole conversation. By the way, every night at the end of the live stream for the course of the summer, I'm going to be reading excerpts from a book called Weird Scenes in the Canyons, story of Laurel Canyon and the LA music scene, the burgeoning LA music scene back in the mid-60s. Because it was a friggin' freak show. And tonight we're going to talk about the Doors. So speaking here is Mr. David Cosby, and he's quoted saying, "By that I mean, give me a lead singer. He's got sort of an androgynous blonde hair, very pretty. Okay, we need a guitar player, sort of hatchet face, wears a hat, plays very fast, very dramatic." And I realized as I'm reading this that he's actually describing Aerosmith to a T. So this is a dig at Aerosmith. Wears a hat, plays pretty fast, very dynamic. He has to be very dramatic. Give me a pound of bass player, a pound of drummer. They're making little cardboard cutouts. They hire a producer, they hire writers, and in the current stuff now, they don't even bother getting people to play. Don't even bother with that guitar player, that bass player, that drummer, any of that nonsense. The people in those bands can't write, play, or sing. And this is David Cosby Not describing, Aerosmith as who came later in the 70s. This is a quote from the mid 60s, mid to late 60s. So, you know, there's that. Tommy Mack, how you doing? Welcome. Hey, Hillary, how you doing? Welcome. At the very beginning of this journey, it was noted that Jim Morrison's story was not in any way unique to the other people in Laurel Canyon, which is just an odd thing because this story is freaking strange. That, however, is not exactly true. It is certainly true that Morrison's family background did not differ significantly from that of his musical peers, but in many other significant ways, Jim Morrison was indeed a most unique individual, and quite possibly the most unlikeliest rock star to ever stumble across the stage. Morrison arrived late on the scene, but as a fully developed rock star, complete with a backing band, a stage persona, and an impressive collection of songs, enough to fill the Doors' first few albums. I'm gonna let that sink in for a minute. This guy showed up 1 year before he's on the deck of his father's destroyer. A year later, he shows up as a fully fledged, fully realized. Yeah, I saw the Doors, movie. I saw Star Wars too. You catch my meaning? Yeah, I'm sorry. I'm taking a lot away from those guys. Now, did they learn how to play eventually? Yeah. Could they play a bit at first? Yeah, I guess. But still, they weren't writing those songs. They weren't cutting that stuff like that and then going into the studio, producing, arranging, posing those songs, cutting the vocals, and then they went to the record company and said, hey, we got all this great stuff. Who does that? And who has the money to do that? What starting LA rock band, especially back in the 1960s, has that kind of bread in order to do that? How exactly he reinvented himself in such a radical manner remains something of a mystery. Of course it does. Since before his sudden incarnation as a singer-songwriter, James Douglas Morrison had never shown the slightest interest in music. None. Zero. Whatsoever. Not emphasizing what David wrote. He certainly never studied music and could neither read nor write it. By his own account, he never had much of an interest in even listening to music. He told one interviewer that he never went to concerts, one or two at most. And before joining the Doors, he never did any singing, never even conceived of it. Asked nearly at the end of his life if he had any desire to learn to play a musical instrument, Jim responded, no, not really. Was Dick Cavett the ringleader? Nah, you know what, guys? I'm going to tell you that Dick was his own, but Dick was a solid guy. From what I know, maybe something will come out later on, but Dick Cavett actually was a solid guy. He had on a lot of people. He broke the color barriers on TV. I'm never going to, there's just guys like that unless he was sacrificing, to who, short of that, I'm not going to find any fault with him. So no. But he certainly was part and parcel of the machinery that was grinding this stuff out. So here we have a guy who never sang, who never even conceived of the notion that he would open his mouth and make sounds come out, who couldn't play an instrument and had no interest in learning such a skill, and who never even listened to music or been to any kind of concerts near a band, even just to watch one perform, and yet somehow, virtually overnight, he emerged as a fully formed rock star who would quickly become an icon of his generation. Even more bizarrely, legend holds that he brought with him enough original songs to fill the first Doors albums. Morrison did not, you see, do as other singer-songwriters do and pen the songs over the course of the band's career, or in my case, as they come to me. But no. Instead, he wrote them all at once, before the band was even formed, and recorded them. You know, if you guys can listen to this and you can say to me that that stuff was above board in any way, shape, or form, then you are high. You might as well be here down the street at the Dam Cream, token one up. Because this is a fact. Who does that? How do you go from being on, we're talking about 1 year, 12 months, 365 days, okay? How do you go from this January being on your dad's destroyer to the following January being a rock star with several albums worth of material? How does that, especially when you had no interest in doing that in the first place? He could have been a friggin' lawyer or a dentist, you know. And you say, and okay, I will, but he may have had an interest in poetry. I will bring that up because that was brought up here. Mike brought that up. However, there's been really no proof of that either. You know, Morrison did not. As Jim once acknowledged in an interview, he was not a very prolific songwriter. Lyrics. And most of the songs I've written, I wrote in the very beginning about 3 years ago. I just had a period when I wrote a lot of songs. In fact, all the good songs that Morrison is credited with writing were written during that period, the period during which, according to the rock legend, Jim spent most of his time hanging out on the rooftop of his Venice Beach apartment building, consuming copious amounts of LSD. This was just before he hooked up with Ray Manzarek to form the Doors. Legend also holds, strangely enough, that chance meeting occurred on the beach, though it seems far more likely that the pair actually met at UCLA, which is in the movie, which both attended the university's rather small and close-knit film school. I know about the UCLA Film School. I very well. I attended UCLA in the 10th grade, as you guys know. It's right down the street from University High School. They took all of the gifted children over there. In any event, the question that naturally arises, how exactly did Jim, the Lizard King Morrison, write that impressive bunch of songs? Now, this is the writer saying, I'm certainly no musician myself, but it is my understanding that just about every singer-songwriter across the land composes his or her songs in essentially the same manner, on an instrument, usually either piano or guitar. Some songwriters, I hear, can compose on paper, but that requires a skill set that Jim did not possess. You'd have to be Quincy Jones in order to do that. The problem, of course, is that he could not play a musical instrument of any kind, so how did he write the songs? I suppose even if we accept the premise, we are still left with some nagging questions, including the question of how those songs got out of Morrison's head. As a general rule of thumb, if a songwriter doesn't know how to read or write music, he can play the song for someone who does, and therefore create the sheet music. Which was a case, for example, with all the songs that Brian Wilson penned for the Beach Boys. But Jim obviously could not play his own songs like Brian could. So did he do it? How did he do it? How did he hum these songs so that, Okay, play that. That's the point that Dave is trying to make. Okay. I'm just saying, guys. This is the way it is. He wrote a poetry book that was panned by critics at that time. He wrote it. Oh, what is a fact? You're not even making sense. What is your point? Bloody Nine, if you, again, If you don't understand that point, you're high. Jim was a great lyric writer, in my opinion. That makes the Doors unique. He's a skilled poet and brilliant dude with a 153 IQ. That part I believe. The IQ part I believe. You got to be smart in order to pull off some of the things that Dave Marsh is saying that they pulled off. LA Woman is some great stuff. The cops and cars, the topless bars. Never saw a woman so alone. Yeah. Can you please try to make whatever point you think you have anytime soon? Could you please be invited to my good friend Scott Bogfoot and his wonderful deletion key? And so there's that, guys. You know, I'm not saying this. I'm just reading what Dave researched and the conclusions that he came to. So there's that. And why, after a few years of adopting the rock and roll persona, did Jim suddenly transform once again in the last year of his life to have lost his interest in music altogether and suddenly became a bloated, overweight, heavily bearded recluse poet? Just on the turn of a dime. Suddenly he's shirtless, long hair. Next thing, he's fat with a beard. He looks like the dude from that Coen Brothers movie. Seriously, I always thought that Jeff Bridges was basing the dude on later Jim Morrison. The entire band differed from other Laurel Canyon bands in a number of significant ways. The Doors were always different. They lacked previous band experience. They were film students. Kruger and Dinsmore came from a trans meditation class that was being attended by Manzarek at UCLA. None of them were studio musicians. Anyway, the point is that none of the four members of the Doors had any real band credentials. Even a band as contrived as the Byrds or the Monkees, as we should soon see, had members with band credentials. So too did Buffalo Springfield with Neil Young and Bruce Palmer, for example, having played in the Minor Birds, which, by the way, that is the group that Rick James played in. Rick James played in the Minor Birds. Again, that's another Rick James connection here. Oh, he brings it up here. Backing a young vocalist who would reinvent himself as Rick Superfreak James, Goldie McJohn, Steppenwolf, oddly enough, was also in the Minor Birds as well. The Mamas and the Papas were put together from elements of the Journeymen and the Mugwumps, and all the other Laurel Canyon bands all had professional musicians in them. The only one example that did not was the Doors. The Doors could cite no such band lineage. They were just four guys who happened to come together to play songs written by the singer who never sung, but who suddenly had a calling and a magic gift for songwriting. And as you could expect with four guys who never actually played in a band before, they didn't really play very well. And that's kind of an understatement. Don't take my word for it, though. Let's let the band's producer, Paul Rothchild, we'll talk about it, and he is a Rothschild. He's not just by that, but he is a Rothschild. Paul Rothchild, he dies very ugly. But anyway, Paul Rothschild weighs in. The Doors were not great live performers musically. They were exciting theatrically and kinetically, but as musicians, they just didn't make it. There was too much inconsistency. There was too much bad music. Robbie would be horrendously out of tune with Ray. John would be missing cues, and there was a bad mic usage too, where you couldn't even hear Jim at all. And this is even during the time when Jim wasn't drunk on stage. So there's that. There's that. Let me catch up here. LA Woman is some great stuff. Yeah. Teen Idol morphs into Big Lebowski. Yeah. In the course of a year. How does that happen? And I think the film school connection there, and acting, theater, theatrics, that Paul Rothschild was talking about there, plays a part in changing characters, changing roles. How many times did Madonna change? How many times did these guys change? Where do you think they got that from? I always got the impression that at root, Morrison was an alcoholic poet. Yep. Who only moonlighted as a psychedelic lead singer. I think that would be closer to the truth. At least that aspect. Greg, we miss you, Mr. President. We could really use you right now. No, you wouldn't want me, and you really don't want him again. You really don't. All right, so I'm gonna end it there, guys. But just touching upon the Doors, you know, I'm sorry, guys. I just, I'm just of the opinion that the Laurel Canyon scene was produced. And the echoes of that production still echo out to today. Sex Pistols could not play when they started up, but they ended up being big time rock band. Yeah. Yeah, but that was the spirit of them. There was just to make noise and thrash on stage. That's a completely different thing from what the Doors were doing with Come On Baby Light My Fire. That was the punk scene, the EBGB punk scene out of New York during that time. So I could, if I walked in there, I would not expect to hear Barry Manilow. So that's okay. That's acceptable. Yeah. Mike, do you think knowing this stuff takes away from the music of these bands? No. Because somebody did it, and that's still Jim's voice on those albums. He's still singing it. He may not have thought about singing, but he had an interesting voice. So no, it doesn't take anything away from it. Just don't be deluded into thinking, oh man, I want to get a record contract just like the Doors, and then I can be a big musician like them, because it doesn't work that way. It doesn't work. It's a lot of that stuff is theatrics. I'm going to give you guys a little nugget that has absolutely nothing to do with music, but it's to bring up the point of why I talk about theatrics in this way. Because theater was created as a means in order to get messages out to the public. Controlled messages. That's what this whole Laurel Canyon thing is about. Give you an example of that. How many out there in the audience know who William Shakespeare was? Has anybody ever heard of Shakespeare? I'll wait. Okay. We'll assume yes. Now, I'm going to tell you, without any question, that Shakespeare never existed. There was no William Shakespeare. There was a guy named Sir Francis Bacon who belonged to a theatrical writing and production guild at Cambridge in the 16th century, and the name of this group was the Shakers. And they took their name from their patron goddess, because all those groups had to have a patron goddess or god. Their patron goddess was Mithra. And Mithra is a goddess who's known for having a spear in her hand, and she's leading her army, and she shakes her spear at the oncoming enemies. Shakespeare. See how that works, guys? Now, if you think I'm BSing you, you look that up. There is no William Shakespeare. Every time you see an actor on a TV show or production playing Shakespeare, that's just extending the illusion. And the real purpose behind theater and storytelling. I think we all saw that with the changes we saw in Star Wars, where it was one thing and then they changed the message on you. They do, that was the purpose of that, is to try to change. Nobody bought it, thank God. And that era seems to be gone and put to bed. But you guys understand that everything is an illusion. There's no Shakespeare. All that stuff was written by Sir Francis Bacon, and that's a fact. Shakespeare was a nom de plume, as they call it. All right, guys. Good night. I will see you. I just bought some guitars. I bought some nice guitars this week. I bought my first Greco 70s Telecaster. I can't wait to get that bad boy in. I'm sure it weighs a ton. But I bought a Greco Tele that was in great condition. And we've been talking about Greco Tele, so that's coming up, guys. Anyway, I will see you guys coming up here in the next live stream. Please have a pleasant week this week, and I will talk to you soon. Bye-bye.